research shows the temperature difference, shade, natural grass, artificial grass, concrete, it's like 10 or 15 degrees difference on the ground. Trees are everything.
There was some project they did in Darwin that's been active for a couple of years. They tried to make a big sort of shade structure over some shopping mall. It was just like some wooden sort of supports with like wires that they're supposed to have vines growing across. And they're hoping that'll reduce temperatures by like 2 or 3 degrees, and it was about 0.5 degrees at most.
It was
because it didn't work properly.
And it's the breeze, it's the movement of air. And
I've read something that in Canberra, the suburbs with established trees are on average 7 degrees low.
Oh, so different. So, and in the early days in Canberra, like when you built a house in Canberra, the National Capital Development Commission and their nurseries at Yarralumla, you would get 50 shrubs and 10 trees free to plant in your garden. And then Lindsay Pryor, if you Google Lindsay Pryor, he was the architect of all the beautiful tree plantings in Canberra. Absolutely gorgeous. And you know, we have an arboretum in Canberra, not the new one, but every street is a part of Canberra's arboretum, particularly in old Canberra, magnificent stuff. So coming back to the campaign for Snowy Hydro, very much a people power campaign, and in so many voices, like the Sun Herald, the Financial Times, the Courier, some backblocks newspaper before journalism was kind of killed and the rug pulled under community journalism, Western Australia, Victoria, down below Snowy, all of those journalistic outlets right across Australia, radio, TV, before the internet was really a big thing, all said no. And anyway, so when Turnbull took the seat in Parliament House, he could see that there was some advantages to the Commonwealth ownership of Snowy Hydro. So that came about. We had to keep an eye on him and make sure he didn't become tempted to sell it for a windfall. Snowy Hydro, so it's now as secure as could possibly be. So the corporation Snowy Hydro Limited is owned by you. You're a shareholder. Everyone in Australia is a shareholder of Snowy Hydro. We don't need new shareholders. We are all shareholders, okay? It has a board, it has directors, it has a CEO, all that sort of thing. But we, the people, own Snowy Hydro. Okay. Now, Snowy 2.0, I won't go into the pluses and minuses of Snowy 2.0, but we could see, in a way, from the advocate activist point of view, from Alpine River Keepers, from the Snowy River Alliance, we could see that we were probably not going to get a lot of traction in stopping Snowy 2.0. So we some of us made a strategic decision that instead of doing that, what we would do is try and get an environmental dividend out of Snowy 2.0. I've sent Rob the link. So far, one of the dividends is 100 million, which is a fair bit of money, for reparation of Kosciuszko National Park and the impacts of the engineering of Snowy 2.0. And for tree planting. So within the last 6 months, I've been, talking to Snowy Hydro and to national parks. Like, we need to do this reforestation quick, smart. So based on what we've been talking about, why do we need to do alpine ecosystem, subalpine, mountain forest ecosystem? Why do we need to do it, everyone? Come on. Yeah, but why? Why do we need trees? Why do we need entire ecosystems?
For the future, to have resilient ecosystems and resilient communities.
Cool. Why do we need resilient ecosystems? Like a forest ecosystem, what does it deliver us?
So they can adapt to climate change's effects, I guess. You provide resources to people in the future as well.
What are the resources? What's a key resource? Water. Okay. Now, water is the resource that we're talking about in terms of the Snowy scheme and the mountains. To get water, it doesn't just happen, but one of the things about the Australian alpine ecology, and you'll talk with Marion later about that, is the biodiversity of the alpine flora. I'm lucky because I've got a science resource by the way of my dad, who's 95 and a half down the coast. And I'm thinking something, I go and see him. I don't even ask him, he just comes up with the answer. So why exactly, Dad, is the alpine flora more biodiverse here than anywhere else in the world? I'm thinking. And he just pops out with the answer, I don't even have to ask. The reason is, in the last glaciation, the Kosciuszko region wasn't scoured for ice, like in Europe or the Himalayas or younger mountain systems. We had a periglacial process which allowed some of the deep humus soils to remain intact and the remnants of the vegetation. So we had a kind of a, not a permafrost, but a semi-hibernation of the flora, and the soils remained there. So the temperature warms up in the post-glacial period. The vegetation has already adapted to secreting oils into the soil. It gets a bit of solar radiation and boom. And so we have the most biodiverse alpine flora, and in places deep humus soils. Another factor is that the granite substrate is erodable. And that granite substrate, another new fact from my 95-year-old dad without asking or prompting, is that the granite is more porous and can hold more water. So this is worth protecting, not only because it's only 0.01% of the Australian landmass, but it is the preeminent water catchment for the Murray-Darling Basin and the MIA. So depending on where you do your reading, up to 50% or 30% of the 30% of the Murray-Darling Basin or 50% of the MIA in terms of its economic value, which is up to what, 15 billion, Rob, per annum? It changes up every year. So the Murray-Darling Basin and all of those communities are linked with the snowy catchments and this river, the Snowy River. So we have to fight for this river. This river does not live by itself. It needs us, the people, to commit our energy, our interest, our passion, our understanding, science, wrap that all together, human ecology, socio-economic systems linked to natural ecosystems to keep this river vital. Really, really important, okay? And that's what ecosystems are all about. Increasingly, we're just biological beings. Yeah, humans have been around, 300,000 years, Homo sapiens? It's not that long, really. And it's only in, the last 70,000 years, maybe, Rob, that we've had the creative explosion where we've been able to refine our tools and build art into our tools. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, yes. We are what? As creative humans, less than 100,000 years old. So our creativity needs to come with creative solutions to minimize, to wind back climate change and ecosystem collapse. So it's not as if we haven't had glacial periods in the past. We have. We also have had in the past, obviously, the tertiary, the hotter, wetter, Jurassic type periods on the Earth with more vegetation, where it's been hotter and wetter. But where's the water now? Where's the water? Answer? Where's the water? Where's the water?
Ice.
Where's the water?
Clouds.
Getting very close. So what is the leading greenhouse gas? Water vapor. How do we get the water vapor out of the atmosphere, people? Hygroscopic seeding by bacteria from forests. What do we need to do? Yes! And what will that deliver?
More water.
More water, more rain, better flows for the Snowy River, okay? So if you read around the microorganism communities in the atmosphere, and they are communities that are multiplying and growing in the atmosphere, we have to actually increase their population so they can pull the water vapor out of the sky. What intercepts water vapor in the sky from forming droplets of rain, precipitation, snow? What prevents that from happening? What's an interceptor? Just like COVID. Like, what do you need to intercept? Something has to intercept that process of droplet formation. What would that be? What's stopping it from happening? Industrial pollution.
Right.
From Melbourne, from the old Hazelwood power station. So the NASA Tropical Rainfall Measuring Mission, there's a guy called Rosenfeld, his paper's 2000, I said Robert Link, he did the study on industrial pollution intercepting, because the enucleation particles are so small that a droplet won't form, it won't precipitate. What do we see in the data? A decrease in winter precipitation. Okay, so very important that we reduce our emissions, we increase our seeding from forests, and we change the balance. So seeding from forests will create rain, but what's the other thing it'll do? What is the other thing that will happen when we have less greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, including water vapor? What are we all trying to do here? Cool down. And what will that do to the alpine flora, which is going to struggle to adapt in time to climate change? It'll give it some breathing space, okay? So those forest ecosystems that are crashing, the alpine flora that's now going to be seriously challenged, needs to have cooler temperatures, and particularly in the winter, increase the snowpack, which is a part of the ecosystem that'll feed the Snowy River. Now we have another interceptor to this river, and we know what it is. What is it? Dams. Lots of them. Dams, tunnels, aqueducts, people. So those engineering things are in place, and when properly managed with the right regulations or the right understanding, they should release water into those river systems and flushing flows. So engineering, it's what's just happened in the Himalayas, everyone. What has just happened? Come on, who watches the news? What happened 2 days ago? In India, what happened? Glacial melt took out 2 hydro plants and killed a pile of people. Glacial melt. Okay, that is what is happening on the Earth. And our very own Snowy Mountains Engineering Corporation, based in Kumar, was the architect of a lot of those mini hydro systems in the Himalayas in India and Nepal. That's what's happening on planet Earth. So even engineering structures are not immune to the results of human activity on planet Earth, taking out those systems. Okay? So I can't speak on behalf of our Aboriginal friends, and past and present, I can refer to them, the Monero people. This is their camp along the river. There's the Bundian Way. Has anyone heard of the Bundian Way? It's just one of the many, many walking paths from the mountains back to the coast in Victoria, New South Wales, walking paths over to Tumut. I'm not the right person to tell you about those things, but we know that the rivers are the corridors. I need to just finish with Ken Green, Rob. I don't know how our time's going. But, Ken, remarkable ecologist, and he had some health issues, but Ken, for 40 years has been describing and studying a very specific and important species. Does anyone know what it is? Along with many in the insect family. The bogong moths, okay? So we had a sort of a crash of the bogong moths last year. There used to be over 1 billion would come through Canberra and cloud what was going on in Parliament House as if it wasn't murky enough already, and find their way here to the mountains. And the bogong moths feed, used to feed the Aboriginal people, they feed the pygmy possums, the bogong moths feed crows, the Burgong moss, Ken was telling me yesterday this year, are at Kosciuszko and South Ramsey. So that is one population. He told me yesterday the IUCN is examining a few insect species across the planet. The Burgong moth is one. And the march flies, has anyone been bitten by a march fly? Hey, guess what? March flies are pollinators, and last year they didn't have any flowers, and there were very few march flies. This year we had lots of flowers. So Ken's doing important work on the Burgong moths. Okay, any questions in our context of the rivers and the mountains and the forests and their interconnectedness with us?
So I came on this field trip, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and it was really interesting to hear you talk about the state of the river then versus now. And I remember when we came, it was a mere trickle. It smelt poorly, and I know that, we've had this La Nina season and we've got some more rainfall in it. But have you seen a change in the last 5 or 6 years? What's the policy? How is that affecting sort of the flows that you're actually seeing come through?
At the beginning, when we had the big flushing flow event over Jindabyne Dam Wall, and John Gallard was a strong advocate to get that dam wall apron concrete put on it. And then we had a big rain year, and then the flushing flows, and that scarred out the river. So the scientists around the time, Brett Miners, Tim Fletcher, those people have shown definitively the increase in riparian health. And the canoeists and the kayakers had a great time riding the river, below the gorge, some through the gorge and down here and further down. And further downstream, the science shows that riparian zone health improved dramatically. We can't smell the stagnant river today because of La Nina. So the water flows are just so critical. I want to present a case in just a sentence, that we often hear that water that flows out to the sea is water that's wasted. Does anyone believe that? Does anyone believe that? I'll give you an example. The Galapagos Island, where Darwin started, the origin of the species and natural selection, and the Galapagos was a very clear indicator of natural selection in different environments and habitats. Well, guess what fertilizes the western shores of the Galapagos? What fertilizes those shores? Anyone? Out of the blue, guess? Yeah, and which rivers from where? I think a long way away from the Galapagos, same ocean probably, but which rivers? Big rivers with mountains, Papua New Guinea. Those rivers fertilize the Galapagos, okay? Now imagine the Snorri River, when it had 12 of, most of the rivers, except the ones going west. The Yukonbean, the Snorri, the Thredbo, all their tributaries, the Mwamba. Big snow year, 1917 was a big rain year, big snow year, boom, down the river, taking everything with it. On the floodplains, you have silt down at Orbost, but the rest of it goes out to sea. What does it do? It fertilizes parts of New Zealand and Tasmania, okay? So you have a marine and an estuarine environment that is a discrete and whole environment with all those other species that have got nothing to do with cotton and beef and wheat and sheep. It's a whole marine environment that relied on those huge river flows, important environments. Okay, so water out to sea is not waste of water by any means. And if you look on Google Earth, if you go around Google Earth around the Australian continental shelf, just take Google Earth around the shelf, and there's one river that is a standout for its flow volume. Guess which river it is? The Snorri. You have a look at the continental shelf, there's one river the whole way around Australia that does that, where the Snorri used to come out. And so in the last ice age, for example, when there was more ice, okay, and the sea level was lower, the rivers flowed further. It's underwater now, but where the Snowy used to come out, it was a massive carve event. That tells you what the volumes used to be like. And when you look at the river now, it's just like, oh my God, what happened there? Like, what happened there? It's just a trickle coming out of the tap, not, a fire hose event. That's what's happened. Because there are so many humans on the planet now, and we're all conscious of energy consumption, and we're conscious of water consumption, we're conscious of plastics, we're more conscious of what we consume and what we do. But in time, and sooner than later, we're going to have to pull that water vapor out of the sky and create rain. Okay.
And listening to you talk, it sounds like we need to take more of a holistic approach to the way we manage the river, in conjunction with lobbying for increased environmental flows and things like that. But given the current approach to, ecology and things, like being more economy, business driven and stuff, do you have high hopes for the future?
I do, and sitting there is the high hope. You are all the hope for the future. You've chosen human ecology, society, ecosystem science. You've chosen that as your discipline. So that means that you understand already what we need to do is to integrate the way that we manage, govern, create laws to reflect both ways, like a homeostasis between the environment and people. You already know that, you already understand that. And it's just a matter of finding the pathways. The other thing that gives me great hope is that, look, I honestly think that the majority of young people are switched on and get it, okay? And the power dynamic is shifting. It's all about power, isn't it? And Greta, look at her voice right across the planet. So we have social media. We've seen what social media can do in terms of one particular gentleman in America who's no longer in the seat. We can see that social media and a photo there on Instagram, and then a whole lot of people say, oh, that's so beautiful. And that's what's happening. We can use those media to have an influence, and never underestimate your influence. Like, I look at Mike Edmondson's photos, if you Google him, beautiful photos of the high country. A local friend, Coral, put on Instagram the other day, beautiful photos of the Thredbo River. And then there are other Instagram sites, of nature, and Australian Geographic, National Geographic. I think people are increasingly switched on to nature. And, those influences, it's taken 40 years for the renewable energy economy to get legs. Okay, it's got legs. It's outstripping the fossil fuel economy. So ecosystem services and a dollar value on ecosystem services. So how much do the mountain environments create dollar value? We know it's multi-billions of dollars. When that is in the common language, ecosystem services have a dollar value. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? I think you should always maintain hope. You should always be patient. And you should always look for pathways, little pathways, big pathways. So a tree. The big pathways are the old root channels going deep down into the groundwater. The little pathways are the root systems that pop up after a fire, and the rootstock will create new saplings, okay? Look for every pathway, any pathway. And it doesn't matter if you can't see it today, you'll see it in 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I've seen the renewable energy economy in less than 45 years. The closing of Hazelwood Power Station, okay? So every little thought, every tiny action that you take has an impact, because we are part of the web, not the World Wide Web, but we are part of the web of nature. So everything that we do has an impact on every other part of nature. Isn't that so? So everything that you think has an impact. So always maintain hope, because it is happening, and increasingly it'll happen. And you are the future. You know, you're sitting in the seat. You will craft the legislation in the future. You'll look at the existing legislation and you'll say, well, that has to change, and we'll put that regulation through. Like, Rob, have you looked at the horse situation, or are you looking at that on this?
Probably mostly tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
With Marion.
Yeah, and so we have now the Deputy Premier retreating from, there are around 20,000 horses, to, yes, we've got to get the numbers down to 600. That position has taken several years, but it's happened. And the Safe Cause Improvement, it's happened. So it happens. People power, individuals, groups of people, scientists are so important. Okay, so always think, how can I solve that problem? And just find a
So then, what you might think about movements that have using the legal systems to, say, grant personhood to a river, and how they did that in New Zealand, and how, whether or not that would work, like what you think about whether that works, in the idea of extending rights. And I guess more broadly talking about like how our current frameworks, like our legal frameworks and our economic frameworks, function. Like, do we actually need to change those frameworks, or do we need to work within them?
It's both.
Yeah.
So cultural change is the most important thing, okay, and new people coming in change the culture. But that is just so beautiful, isn't it? A river has inherent rights. An ecosystem has so many habitats for so many species. That ecosystem has inherent rights. And that's the legislation we need to write. The inherent rights of specific ecosystems is so important. And globally, we've seen the rivers have become just, pipelines that have been commercialized, but they do have rights. So that's where we need brilliant new lawyers writing that legislation and getting it through Parliament, and presumably with bipartisan support. Where we've come, is everyone COVID-free and everyone's family has been uninfluenced by COVID? Apart from our lives, yeah. Have you got people who've been impacted?
No, luckily not.
Yeah, I mean, economically and in other ways we've been impacted, but in Australia, what COVID has done is that, hey, we all have to be on the same page here, yeah? And that's what we have to do with ecosystem and human ecology science. Hey, we have to be on the same page. This is our future: oxygen, water, fertile soil, habitable living spaces, communications. We have to be on the same page. We can do it. And that cultural change, but crafted around that change in culture, is gentle, embracing legislation that says ecosystems and their habitats and the species within those ecosystems also have inherent rights, and we are interconnected. Yeah.
Probably need to move on up to Charlie. So, unless someone had a pressing final quick question. That being no, going on. Can we thank Acacia for her time?
You're welcome. And thanks for turning up, people. And I always say to Peter, 90% of getting your results is just turn up. Have a good time.